The law of conservation of momentum is the direct outcome of the third law of motion. Do you remember the third law? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. When two objects interact, the force applied by the first object on the second one will be equal to the force applied by the second object on the first. Now consider these two objects moving towards each other. Assume that the first object has mass m1 and the second object has mass m2, and they're moving at velocities u1 and u2. Now when they collide, both objects apply an equal and opposite force on each other. Say F1 and F2. F1 is the force applied by object 1 on object 2, and F2 is the force applied by object 2 on object 1. Now what happens when a force is applied on an object? Yes, the object accelerates. So let's say the forces causes acceleration of A1 and A2 on the objects respectively. And what is the time duration for which the objects apply a force on each other? Say it's T1 and T2. Will T1 and T2 be equal? Of course, yes. That's because they are in contact for the same period of time. The time for which force is applied by 1 on 2 is the same as the time for which force is applied by 2 on 1. Now that we have all the parameters ready, let's discuss the Newton's third law. When two objects interact, they apply an equal and opposite force on each other. Hence, F1 will equal negative F2. Now, based on Newton's second law, what will F1 and F2 be equal to? Force is the product of mass and acceleration. Hence, we can say that m1a1 will equal negative m2a2. And the acceleration is nothing but the rate of change of velocity. And we get this. As T1 and T2 are equal, we get this equation. Solving this equation further gives us this equation. This equation tells us something amazing. Do you remember what momentum is? Momentum is the product of mass of an object and its velocity. So what we have on the left is the total momentum of the objects after the collision. And on the right, we have the total momentum of the objects before the collision. This is called the law of conservation of momentum. The total momentum of the two objects remain unchanged after the collision. The total momentum before the collision is equal to the total momentum after the collision. And yes, there's an assumption here that there's no external unbalanced force acting on either of the objects. In the next video, we will look at a couple of examples related to this law.